Hi, my name's Dan, and this video is one in a series of videos that I'm doing on designing magic systems for video games, which is part of a larger suite of videos about games design and games design issues that are on my channel. Okay, and this one I'm going to talk about Brandon Sanderson's 3 laws of magic. And you might be saying, what now? You might be saying, oh yes, I know those. So for the benefit of the what now people, let's plow on. So Brandon Sanderson is a fantasy author. He's not a game designer, or as far as I know, he's never been involved in designing games. He's written quite a good selection of fantasy books. Here's a picture of him holding one of his books. Apparently that's a German version. Why you'd need to know that, I don't know. And here's a shot of one of his series of books, which is the Mistborn series of books. He's a current author. He's well thought of in fantasy circles. He got involved in finishing off possibly the largest set of fantasy books, which is a set called Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. And after Robert Jordan died, Brandon Sanderson helped by finishing off the series. But his own books, I would strongly recommend them to anybody who likes fantasy, and particularly fantasy of any depth. He is definitely a favourite of mine. And he did a series of lectures that are available on video platforms. I don't know if they're all available on YouTube. I will certainly put the URL of his lecture on his 3 laws of magic in the credits, and I hope I will remember to do also to put a direct link in the description below. So look out for that. This is kind of a précis or summary of what he says in that, but also in that video he's talking directly about his rules and how he uses them for creating magic systems for his writing. And what I want to do is I want to take his 3 rules and flip them a little so that you can apply them to game design. So here we go. We'll go through the 3 laws. So the first one is an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. And I think some versions of this have the word satisfaction, or how satisfying it is to solve these things. And what he's really trying to say with this is that rather than just pulling rabbits out of the hat at the drop of another hat, that's a mixed metaphor, somewhere in your story you say, the hero's dangling over a cliff, and the twig that they're holding onto snaps, and they're falling down, and suddenly they realise that they have levitation magic. And so this has just come out of nowhere, but the more the system of magic that is in use is understood, then the more satisfying it is when that is used to solve a narrative problem. So it's much more acceptable if the readers are going, but why don't you use the such and such? Because they understand the principles of the magic. So I want to reword this slightly for actually in 2 different ways in terms of how it can relate to games. So a designer, so that's the game designer's ability to resolve story issues. So some games obviously have heavy story stuff. So how his Brandon Sanderson's law relates to narrative is directly applicable here. A designer's ability to resolve story issues with magic is directly proportional to how well the player understands said magic. So this is just a rewording so that we're in the game context. But there is another side of this as well, which is that a player's ability to resolve problems with magic is directly proportional to how well they understand the magic system. So it's not just the storytelling resolution, but it's also in games players get to play around and try all sorts of things. And the better they understand what the magic can do, the better they are able to solve problems. And in an earlier video in this series, I made spent quite a bit of time about talking about giving players tools and problems rather than fixed solutions, and that comes into play here. Right, I want to keep moving on, so let's get on to the second rule, which is what the magic can't do is more interesting than what the magic can do. And another way of phrasing this is that limitations are interesting. And this is obviously very true and applicable in games. That limitations are great, and again, I talked about this in a previous video in this series as well. It's kind of a standard game design to think that the designer gives and the designer takes away. And whenever you give power to the player, you take something away, or you give some limitations, or you make there to be a cost in what they're doing. And that's certainly true, and it comes under this rule. But also, presenting, when you're in the situation where you're presenting players with tasks to do and a magic system to try and tackle that, or other things that they can do as well. So not just magic, might be physical things they can do as well. The limitations of what they can do make more interesting challenges than, in some ways, than the capabilities. Okay, so butting up against limitations is a great way to get people to be creative. And then the third one is to expand what you already have before you add something new. So I think that for a game designer, this is actually a rule that could be applied generally across the whole of game design and mechanics, not just magic systems, which is rather than introducing new mechanics, if you want something new to happen in the game, think about what mechanics you already have, and is it possible to make tweaks or expansions to those mechanics to include the effects or the abilities that you want to have, especially in terms of trying to explain how this makes logic in your game world. This is satisfying, but also it leads to a kind of depth of understanding of your mechanics with your players that is potentially better than just throwing lots of stuff at the player and saying, here, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, and they're all unrelated. So I would encourage you, if you want to know more about Brandon Sanderson's 3 rules of magic, to go look at his video, his lecture on it. I would encourage anybody who's involved in any kind of creative writing, and that includes story writing for video games, to seek out his lectures that he did, because they are gold dust. They're absolutely brilliant. Anyway, next time we're going to start talking about the actual mechanics of magic in games. We've done a lot of background pontificating. It's time to move on to some specifics. So that's it from me for now.